right, folks, good morning. We are at 9:35, which is our official start time. I am excited and also a little sad that it's our last session today. We've been having really great conversations and your participation has been amplified. We've gone through so many different things. We've even had a holiday, right? We had Trinidad's independence last week, so we've celebrated quite a few milestones together in our short series. So today is going to be our last conversation that we'll be having in the series on digital transformation, and we are covering processes. So before we jump into the material, I'm going to ask Philip wants to come on and just say a few words.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back. I've been so busy on the digitalization agenda, all working for BSOs and companies on the other two projects that we have going on, but I'm really happy to be here at the last session. Sorry, I won't be very long. Again, it's all part of it. I'm actually in St. Vincent right now. Very soon I'll be at the airport back to office in Barbados. But I want to say a very big thank you to everyone who have joined these exciting sessions. I've looked at most of the recordings and I'm really happy about the level of interaction and so on and so forth. And I think that Stacey have done a really excellent job in setting the foundation for this important Caribbean Digital Transformation Institute project. And I'm very confident that the participants, the BSOs involved, are now ready to engage later on with the companies they serve in their various jurisdictions to help them with the next exciting step, which is the digital checkup tool. Now it's ready and it's about to go live very soon. As a matter of fact, on Thursday, we're doing a live beta testing in a controlled group where I'm piggybacking on the virtual e-commerce accelerator program we have, because we have about 100 SMEs in the house. So I'm going to use them to do some initial testing of. This is what these sessions with you was about. These 7 sessions was to prepare you with the sort of background information to understand the digital checkup tool. But don't worry, you'll be fully advised going forward when the launch of the checkup tool is ready. You'll be invited. You would have other material so that you can use, so that you can help the businesses understand the checkup tool, help them to use it, help them to complete it, and so that they can have a better idea of their digital maturity. So big thank you to everyone, and I want to wish you all the best. Please stay engaged. And those of you who have not yet signed up on the Virtual E-Commerce Accelerator program as a BSO, please do so. I've shared the link before, and I'd ask my colleague Dario from Caribbean Expo to share with you again. Stacy, awesome. I want to thank you so much for this. I'm representing Velsoft, and Velsoft has proven to be a really excellent partner, and I really want to thank you for the depth and perspective that you bring and the Caribbean elements to it, which is really critical for us. I mean, that's really critical. And we could not have chosen a better person to do that sort of appropriation, regional appropriation that is so necessary for us. So I want to thank you very much. I want to wish everyone all the best. And the recordings are already, most of them are already online, but we're going to put them in one spot so everybody can get them in one go. So thank you very much. All the best and have a great day as you explore processes in digitalization.
Thank you so much, Philip, for all your kind words and for your encouragement, because we need that, right, for this new frontier. So thanks so much for being a gracious host, and I'm excited about the tool and looking forward to hearing about its success.
Great. Have a great one.
All right. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gents. So we're going to go ahead and get started now with processes. And we do have quite a bit of information to cover today. And so I'm going to jump right in. Please, as usual, we want to make sure that you are dropping any questions or comments or anything like that in the chat. And we are going to get started with our check-ins. And it's been a weekend, right? So we know what we're going to use to check in today. Okay, so as I'm sharing our usual ground rules, guys, I'm just asking you to jump in the chat and just share with us what exciting thing you did this weekend. Last weekend, we had quite a few persons that took time off to rest. Some persons went to the beach. Some persons didn't get out of bed. Everybody just kind of seemed like, it was great. I think one person had a spa day and I felt a little jealous. I went to Vegas to see Beyonce. So it was like, yes, I think we all came back feeling like great, ready to go, excited, inspired, rested, all different kinds of things. So how did this weekend fare for you all? Drop me a note in the chat so I can know. Was it as exciting as last weekend? Certainly not for me. I did not have Vegas twice in a month. That would have been just like epic, but no such luck. So what did you guys do? How are you feeling? Let's check in. Let me hear how you guys are doing, how your weekend was. I am Stacy. I'm your facilitator. I've been your facilitator for this entire series and for this final session. Our ground rules, we participate, right? What you put in is what you get out, and we encourage ongoing engagement and participation in this conversation. We can disagree with one another, and that's okay, but when we're providing feedback, we're going to do so constructively and respectfully. We'll put on our listening ears, right? So that we can make sure that we are deep listening when somebody else is speaking. And we are now clear that this is a great place for us to share and to learn and to make mistakes, because we are in a safe environment. So we do want to make sure that you guys feel that safety. And then, of course, we agree to be responsible for our own behavior. Now, as we go into today's agenda, right, I'll go ahead and check the chat to see what kind of weekend activity we had. Just 2 persons. I guess everybody else worked this weekend. Nobody else had a weekend. All right, no problem. Home in the heat. Lost electricity Saturday and Sunday. Oh, wow. This is definitely a Caribbean thing, the losing of electricity. I'm happy that it's back, okay? So that you don't have to deal with that during the week. And Catherine said this weekend was busy with church stuff, planning for some big service projects. Nice. Okay, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing, Catherine and Iola. So today we're going to be talking about processes and process mapping, process automation, and looking at one of the methodologies that's, I would say, a pretty popular methodology for process mapping and management, which is the lean methodology. And one of the reasons why it's important for us to look at processes is because when you are shifting into digital transformation and actually looking at the organization as a whole and looking at ways that technology can help to make the organization more efficient, more productive, more profitable, then one of the key things you have to examine are the processes, right? So this is exactly what we're going to be doing, is looking at how we can map out our processes, understand why process mapping can actually be helpful, figure out when exactly would automation improve a process, and understanding the basics of one of the processes that has worked very well for some large organizations, and get some general understanding around that particular business process mapping methodology, right? So first and foremost, we're going to start off with process mapping. So what is a business process, right? And what is process mapping? Well, when you think about processes, right, a process is essentially everywhere. It's all around. Processes are used every day. There is literally a process for every single thing that outcome that you're trying to create or goal that you're trying to achieve. For example, something as simple as putting gas in a car. The gas cap must be removed from the fuel tank before you insert the gas nozzle and start the flow of gas. And likewise, for every business, there are a variety of processes in place to deal with day-to-day operations of the company. And a business process is an activity or a set of activities that accomplish a specific organizational goal. So we're not just out here willy-nilly doing processes, right? We are actively putting processes in place that are going to help us to get to a specific goal or outcome. So when you think about process mapping, right, there are specific steps that you would be using to create a process map. And what is true is that process mapping is a great way for you to really understand what activities are required to actually get to a particular goal or outcome. So the steps for actually creating a process map is to first and foremost gather and assemble the information about the process. Then the next thing is to put the steps in the order in which they occur, because sometimes you can be collecting the information about a process and you're not necessarily collecting the information in the order in which they actually take place, the activities take place. So first thing you do is you gather and assemble the information, and then you put them in order, and then you draw a map using a digital form or shapes and symbols, right? And inside of the different shapes, then you'd actually identify what exactly the step is in that process. Or sometimes you'll find some persons, some organizations identify the steps, right, like document the steps right below the actual shape or symbol. And then the final step is to review the map and make sure it matches what was originally described in steps 1 and 2. And as this process is happening, right, there is a context when it comes to digital transformation about looking for the future process versus looking at the current process. If you recall, we've actually gone through a process mapping when we did our customer journey map. That was actually a set of activities at different stages that our customers actually move through, right? Or that you move through as a customer. So we've actually looked at process mapping, but we looked at it within the context of customer journeys. But that's a great example of process mapping, even though we didn't use the traditional symbols that are typically utilized for those types of activities. Now, when you think about some of the benefits of process mapping, we've identified maybe the top 5 benefits here. You get an in-depth understanding, identify problems, identify how to implement the process, eliminate redundancies and waste, and create process achieving outcomes, so you understand what the end game is. So let's look at each of these individually, right? When you think about mapping a process, what you will ultimately be able to gain is an in-depth understanding of the different activities that contribute to the outcome, right? And so you are no longer looking at something inside of the business as just what is happening at the end, but you actually understand what it actually takes to get to that particular part, because you have now visually broken the process down into specific components, right? Now, it aids in the understanding and gives you an opportunity to also see where you can improve your performance. Now, when you think about identifying problems, right, that is something that is, of course, very key to process mapping, and one of the major benefits that you would be able to recognize when you are outlining all the activities that are included in a process. Sometimes we take for granted how you actually get to the end game when looking at processes. And the truth is that when you have this map that literally draws out all the different steps, and sometimes you'll start to recognize redundant steps or repetitive steps that are being taken, repetitive actions that are being taken on the way to actually get to an outcome. So you can now start to pull problem areas out of the process, because you have now visually walked through what it actually takes to make sure that this process is actually getting you to your outcome. So it's a great way to identify problems. The third item is that it identifies how to implement the process, right? So when you see a process mapped out, you can not only identify the obstacles or things that are redundant, but you can now get a better understanding of how to implement when something new is coming on stream or when something changes. Many times when processes are not in place, we are introducing new processes, new things, new projects, new goals or outcomes, and we have not clearly articulated the existing process. And so then what tends to happen is you run into challenges, you run into further challenges with introducing new or changed processes. So when you have your process mapped out, it actually gives you the ability to see who is involved, who is going to be affected when you now start to change the process. And this in particular, ladies and gentlemen, is something that's really important when it comes to digital transformation. Because if you are able to see who is impacted in the process that is going to, in the new process that you're introducing, you can start to build on mitigation strategies to handle any challenges that may come about. All right. Now, when you think about identifying problems, which we talked about here, it will make eliminating redundancies and waste a lot simpler because you have now mapped things out. You can see them visually. You've identified problems, and now you can say, all right, so we have some redundant activity here, or we have some activity that's not actually producing anything, which is where the waste comes in. And so now you can start to remove things that are robbing you of productivity and efficiency, and in some cases, actual profitability of the business, right? So eliminating redundancies and waste is one of the big outcomes, the big achievements that a lot of businesses look for when they think about process mapping. And last but not least, process achieving outcome. You will now be able to look through your process and see whether or not it is actually delivering the outcome that you are expecting to get from the process. You know, I don't know if you've ever actually gone through an exercise of looking into an activity that is happening in an organization and you're not really sure of the outcome, right? You have maybe 5, 6 people a part of this process that are working hard all the time, and you're not really sure how it's actually delivering value at the end of the day. Well, when you actually map out your process, and you're able to now get clear line of sight into identifying, well, what are the steps involved? What are the actions involved? And what is the value that we're achieving? You can really get clear about what's supposed to be happening as an outcome at the end of the process and whether or not you are getting to that point. So your process achieving outcome can be clearly articulated. And in some instances, maybe where there was no outcome articulated before, you can determine whether or not the process is necessary or if it's giving you the value that you expected to get from it. Now, when you're looking at process mapping, there are specific symbols that are utilized. If you've used Visio or any kind of tool, technology tool that actually does process mapping or supports you in your process mapping, then you may be familiar with these symbols that are here. But these are some of the basic symbols that you may be introduced to or exposed to as a part of process mapping. They can be changed, of course, to suit your specific needs. And once again, it says basic because there are actually a lot more tools that are available in terms of the symbols. There are a lot more symbols that are available that can be used to be more specific in a process mapping exercise. You can also change the color to indicate whether or not something is, underway or at risk, or green can signify that it's a go. You can utilize different colors to also identify the type of process that it is supporting, maybe the department that is involved, or maybe the roles that are involved. So you can definitely get a bit creative with the symbols. And if you're going to be doing that, you want to make sure that you're also incorporating a legend so that anyone that is looking at the map can easily and readily identify what it symbolizes, right? So the 6 shapes that are your typical shapes that are seen in utilizing your map, first thing is that this is your basic shape that talks about a particular activity or step in the process, right? So this one identifies the step, a general step or activity in your process. The diamond shape indicates a decision point. So when a decision needs to be made, and what will sometimes come off of a diamond shape is a yes or no. So if a decision is made and it's a yes, you might see an arrow taking you through one set of steps versus a no that would then see it going through another set of steps, right? So the oval indicates start or end of process. And then this lovely square, and then the bottom has like a wave, indicates a document that needs to be used, right? So whenever you're going through actual process descriptions, for example, in training for this series, for this course, clearly there are going to be multiple documents to be used, like the manual for the students, for example. So a part of my process that I would have missed at the beginning would have been to drop the student manual. To drop the student manual in the chat. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to make sure that I follow that part of the process that was missing, right? So this indicates a document that needs to be used as a part of the process. And sometimes one of the reasons why this is actually quite useful is that many processes inside of organizations, they are set up, but they don't actually have documentation to support the process. And this actually, when you go through your process mapping, it helps you to highlight documents that may be missing from the actual process itself. When you have a square with lines inside of it, indicates a sub-process. So you may have an activity that has multiple sub-processes that are a part of it. And so that would be indicated by your square with the lines on the inside, the two lines on the inside. And then the arrow simply indicates or symbolizes the flow of things. I think I gave you the example here as a decision point where in some instances, if it's a yes, you may go in one direction. And so your flow would be going one way versus if it's a no, your flow would be going in another way, right? So now this is the basic setup. And essentially, guys, you can use just these 6 symbols to document even complex processes without getting too intricate with utilizing some of the other symbols that you may find in tools like your Visio. So here is an example of a process map, right? And similarly, the decision point, as I would have shared. Okay, so this is the start of our process, and this is the end of our process. So customer places order. Now, if you recall, we had done that journey map, right? So from a marketing perspective, we had kind of walked through the journey. Now we're actually outlining the process in a process map. So the customer pays for the order is received by sales. There may be other processes that happen, activities that happen as a part of the sales that could be further broken out, you know, beyond this particular activity, right? Or sub-processes, sub-activities, sub-tasks that could be broken out beyond this particular item of order received by sales. So the customer pays for the order is received by the warehouse fulfills the order, third-party shipping receives the order. Does the customer receive order after first delivery attempt? No. Then what happens? The third-party shipper attempts to deliver 2 more times. Do they receive the order? No, the order gets returned to the warehouse. Yes, the order is completed. Yes, the order is completed, right? So I'm gonna check in with you all to kind of gauge how exactly it is that you are currently utilizing process maps in your own organization. So I've just launched a poll just to kind of get a sense of whether or not process mapping is something that you utilize in your own organization. And as you are stepping into now the space of working with your MSMEs on digital transformation, this is something that's actually going to be really essential to the success of the work that you're doing with your MSMEs. You know why? Because you're going to be going in there and talking to them about, you know, all these different aspects of digital, and they're going to look at you and they're going to say, well, you know, I don't even know where to start. And the easiest place to help them with the where to start is by talking to them about the different activities that they do in the business that are challenging for them, or that they could use some more efficiency or productivity around. Maybe it is that the business isn't as profitable as they would like it to be, and they're hoping that maybe some of the benefits of digital transformation can help them to increase their productivity. Well, you are definitely not going to understand how to support them with that unless you can see very clearly the activities that are happening and how those processes are supporting or not supporting them. All right, so I have 13 persons that have answered the poll so far. Great. I'll just give another couple of seconds and then I will share the answer. Interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect with this particular poll. Thank you so much for your active participation. So the results are, a few of you have not used process mapping at all, right? Which is also not uncommon. I find that in the Caribbean, it is something that is not necessarily utilized a lot. And in particular in small businesses. So when you have when you're thinking about your MSME group, you may find that there isn't a lot of process mapping that happens. So when you have the smaller companies, it's not necessarily a discipline that is employed very regularly. So not at all. We have 5. We have in the past, but not recently. Yes, I also find that process mapping sometimes happen once at the very beginning of an entity, or maybe you're bringing a consultant, and when the consultant comes in, yes, we have to make sure that we map out the process, and of course we're going to updating, and then the updating doesn't happen because you're busy doing business, right? Yes, we use them all the time, only one person. Yeah, we use them all the time, only one person. Well, I think it's going to be a benefit for you as you go into these organizations to support them with digital transformation. And then I have yes, but only for specific projects, which is just as well, because as you will observe when you are working on your processes, it's not something that you are necessarily going to be continuously doing unless you're continuously supporting business process outsourcing, or you're continuously supporting business process development, or you're continuously supporting transformation projects. Like those types of activities require you to investigate and pay attention to what the process is that is currently being employed in an organization. So the next activity may be an interesting one. So we've actually covered the basics of process mapping, right? And so what I want to prepare you guys for is that you're actually going to be doing a process mapping exercise, choosing a process inside your organization. It can be a simple one, and we'll be going back to those symbols to help you to chart a simple process, just so that you can kind of test it out, get your legs wet kind of thing. Now, part of your process mapping and analysis is really making sure that you're identifying areas for improvement in the business. And it is through this identification that I just mentioned as well when we were looking at the poll. This is what you're going to be supporting the MSMEs with. You're going to be helping them to see where can we improve. And automation leads the charge in that process improvement when you think about digital transformation, right? So it's defining the improvement and then recognizing that by looking at where there is an opportunity for improving, you can now create some accountability within the organization, and you can now move those problem areas into actual action plans to create outcomes that you want to achieve. So you're going to be addressing the problem, you're going to be identifying who is involved in addressing those problems, and you're going to be making sure that the way forward is clear so that you're able to achieve the ultimate outcome that you are going after. To be able to measure the success of the implemented process, it's going to be very necessary to define the improvements that are desired. So again, we kind of go back to what we talked about in our first session and also in our strategy session, that the intention, the why behind all of this is always going to be critical. It always comes back to that. Because if you're not clear on why you're doing something, then you end up doing all these activities that don't have a clear outcome or vision of success in mind, right? Now, one of the other areas that I wanted to point out as it relates to justifying why the process needs to be enhanced or created, none of these things that we're talking about as it relates to digital transformation are happening without some cost. So as you're building out your budget, right, and in the Caribbean region where there may not be a clearly delineated or defined budget for these processes, it's going to be more and more important to have these justifications identified and documented so that it can be shared with the other stakeholders, especially if there's a board of directors or an advisory board who wants to make sure that they are providing the proper governance for the digital transformation initiatives. So when you have the processes identified, documented, that process map is there, then the areas for improvement become clear, and you can now actually have a conversation with your board or whoever your stakeholders are, your investors, to say why exactly you have to put certain process improvements in place, and make sure that you are looking at how you're going to create some ROI, generate savings, increase productivity, etc., etc. Implementing a process within an organization is also not something that is done by just one person in silo, right? One of the challenges that I've experienced with the companies or the clients that I support is that sometimes you'll have some departments that are further along in their thinking about process improvement, or they're thinking about digital transformation, and they just hit the ground running and they're off to the races. But the way that organizations work is that there are interdependencies between different departments. And so you're going to have persons that are early adopters that want to get going, but you have to be careful that the process improvement is not happening in one department without consideration for the other. And you know how we stay here in the Caribbean region, right? We now want to wait on somebody else until they're ready. Right? We want to get going so that we can hit our target. But when it comes to digital transformation, guys, it really is people that make or break the success factor in transformation. And this particular area of process improvement is one of those areas where people have to work together. The organization as a whole has to work together. So even if it's something that's happening with finance that doesn't directly affect marketing, finance still needs to let all the teams know, because maybe it affects sales and marketing interfaces with sales. So you just don't know where there's going to be overlap. And so it's important that our organizations are not operating in isolation. Everybody in the organization is impacted, and so you want to make sure that that is one of the things that you're paying attention to. All right. So here's our activity, right? And essentially what we want to do is we want to think about a process in your organization, within your organization, and map it out. In particular, I'm highly recommending this activity for those of us who are a part of the course that have never actually created a process map, right? So some of the things that you want to think about: what are the steps that are involved in your process? What events will be your start and end points? And I'm going to just drop these in the chat, questions that you should be considering, right, as you choose. I'm just going to drop it in the chat because I actually want to bring the symbols back up on the screen, right, so that you can have a little bit of support as you're going through your process mapping exercise. So you're going to get about, let's say, 5 minutes for this, right? You're going to get 5 minutes just to choose a process in your organization. Remember the steps, guys. Before you even start to put down the symbols, I recommend just choosing a process and just jotting down the different steps that you think, the activities, right? Jot down the activities that you think have to take place in that process. And then from the activities now, you can put them against the different symbols, right? So go ahead and just get going on that. And I'll start the timer and give you approximately 5 minutes to do so. I will also, in the interim, drop the manual for today in the chat in case you did not receive it by email and you want to make reference to it. I have a hand up, Andrea. Andrea, you're going to share your process map?
Yeah, I'd like to share a screen. I typed.
Oh, excellent. Okay, all right. Give me 1 second.
Oh, and one thing I'm asking Catherine, who spoke a while ago, do you start by assessing client needs? Because clients have their proclivities. So they may say to you, this is how we operate. Even though you're speaking with me, from this point on, you're going to be dealing with X. And this is how they work. And they want emails sent to 5 different people and all those norms to be established at ground zero.
Good point. Great point, Andrea. And
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, it doesn't usually happen, but thank you for the.
Oh, okay. Well,
No,
that's good.
No, it's usually pretty
You're
simple.
lucky.
but no, yeah. But thank you. I have had not that complicated, but where the person reaching out to me was an intern, and they would be I then have to send my estimate to the chief financial officer or the marketing officer or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Yes. To break that down. Thank you. Yes.
All right. So I haven't gotten yet. I'm going to take this and convert it into the process flow. I've always wanted to do this and never have. I have it in my head. I have a document as a checklist, but we don't have it as a process flow, which is what we need.
Okay.
Yeah. A map.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for an inexpensive software that can we can enter it and press a button and it spits it out. So this is for process mapping for a non-local bid response. And non-local meaning not Jamaican and not Caribbean. So here we are. Yeah, here. Yeah, so this is, it's in 2 stages. Stage 1 concerns capacity and stage 2 is about methodology. So before we even start, we assess the discipline required. Is this in our lane? And how much of it is in our lane? And because we're in one lane, any project that uses the management science, art, or trends, tradition, business, that's we only do business, that's the lane we're in. So we have so we assess the discipline required, we assess if it is our discipline to a great extent, 70% at least, then we say yes. Then we move to the next step, which is to assess the capacity requirements, which really surrounds deadline. Is it possible for us to drop what we're doing or assign a team member or even buy a resource to complete the bid? Then we assess the country or location alignment in terms of cultural norms, communication norms, things like that. Then we have the cultural fit as it relates to the number 3 concerns policies, the second and laws, and the other one concerns cultural activities and so on. Will our team members be able to find anything to eat? Some basic things like that. Will they have clean running water? All those things. So number 5, determine the fit level. The minimum must be 70. And that is that we have an internal team that can drive this. Then we identify the partners. If we have identified all of them, then we contact the partners and assess alignment, timing, availability, willingness. We have enough, then they sign the statement of exclusivity and availability, which technically says, yes, I am going on this team for this project only, and and I'll be available during implementation period, God willing. And And then we get all of them, then we assess the bidding process to see whether we are all prepared to do what is necessary.
Okay, all right,
Or
I'm gonna
doing-
stop
or-
it. I'm gonna stop it there at stage one.
Okay.
So let me understand, where are you starting? Like, what would you say is the thing that starts the process? So what would be in your overall? Would it be assess discipline? Customer, who is assessing the discipline? Who is doing that?
We are.
Okay, so you are starting the process. Is that what actually starts?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, we receive some communication from some government body or agency which says that this is the work we need to have done.
Okay, so a bid is submitted or a work order is submitted. That is what starts the process.
Yes.
Right.
A
So, or a
request
work
for a
order
proposal.
receive request.
Ah.
All right. So that would be in
Okay, I
your
see you.
overall. Yeah,
See you,
that's
I
what
get
I'm
you.
saying. Right.
Yeah.
So that would be the first thing. And then
Got it.
now you move into that first step of assessing.
Yes.
And so what
Yes.
would be happening now is you look like you would be having quite a few decision points coming
Yes.
out of these assessment
Yes.
areas. And
Yes.
so what would probably be useful in terms of the color coding would be for you to actually highlight decision points. And you could
Okay.
even go as far as saying, if it is 70% like your decision point, when it has a metric, then you make it a
Yes.
green decision point versus one
Yes.
that's clear. You know, like you can play with it in that kind of way to create some distinction. And then I would also probably want to incorporate the roles. So you may want to utilize
Yes.
something that identifies, there seems to be quite a bit of assessment that is happening. Who is doing all of this assessing? Is it the one person that's doing all the assessing, or does it have to actually move?
Well, it's predominantly two people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So then possibly.
But hold on 1 second though. The reality is that when it comes to a bid with multiple disciplines, and I don't want to take too long, I know you're running out, you need time. But when it comes to a bid that requires multiple disciplines, each discipline, each leader in the discipline is boss. So
Right,
they make their own
decisions.
assessment.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
they are able to say yes or no and determine what happens at that
Yes.
point.
And they're able to say that, these are questions that you need to send across. So someone in one discipline won't be able to see what the economist looks at and says, this is a little convoluted. It's not clear. This is one question. So we get the list of questions. I even don't have that step in there where we identify the list of questions in number 10. We assess the bidding, look at the bid documents and send and create a list of questions to send back to the contractor.
And this is done in every single iteration.
Every single living one.
Right,
We have to determine, do we have no questions? Do we have questions? Do we need clarifications?
Right.
Sometimes we even decide not to send a question because it may give away our
Your
value
internal,
proposition.
right.
Yeah.
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 No, okay. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I think you proved a couple of points for us in doing this share is primarily around the fact that, we have to make sure that we know exactly what kicks off that process. And then who are the different players? Who are the persons that have the decision rights? How many touch points are there? And then making sure that you're able to actually identify where those decision points come in and the processes that flow from each of those decision points. So excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Andrea. And my next step for you really would be just on, like a sheet of paper, just actually start to map that process out, because it seems simple enough, but when you start to look at all the different permutations that it could potentially involve, yeah, it would be worthwhile going through and actually utilizing your symbols, even just by hand, to see what comes up. Excellent share, guys. Thanks so much for that. Great value. Okay, so let's move swiftly, guys, into process automation. And this is the whole reason why we're discussing the process mapping as a component or as an aspect of digital transformation. Because when we're talking about digitalization and looking at an entire organization, it's going to be really critical to know, well, what is making this organization work and how can we make it more effective or efficient by implementing automation, right? So the whole idea is to utilize technology to help make the process more efficient and look at whether or not all the steps in the process are going to be automated, or if just some of the steps are going to be automated. If some of the steps are going to be automated, then you know that there's going to be human intervention and interaction required. So there is going to be more of a blended approach. And I think this is also where persons start to get a little bit nervous around digital transformation, because this is where they feel like, oh, so you want to automate out my job. I'm not going to have no work leave by the time you finish your process mapping, and you're seeing where you may not have an actual job after the process has been mapped, right? But the truth is that if it's a partial automation where some of the processes is going to be automated and others are not, then you can support persons in recognizing, the value that they will have in that particular process being successful. And you want to ensure that the persons who are working with the automation, that they are trained, right? That they become now knowledge workers. So they're moving away from the way that they used to do things, because that's sometimes a trap you can fall into, where you introduce the automation, but because human interaction is still necessary, sometimes you'll find that the people will still want to lean into actually utilizing their old methods, right? We've been talking about the big book at the front desk of all our different buildings and government agencies, right? So you know what I'm talking about. Now, it's a different thing when the entire process is going to be automated, because when that happens, you're definitely cutting down human involvement altogether. And as a part of process mapping, it's really important to determine whether or not, and do so as objectively as possible, do we actually need human interaction at this point in time, right? Is it necessary to actually have human interaction? And we'll talk a little bit more about how that can actually work for or against you when you actually are looking at a digital transformation initiative. Now, some of the key benefits of automation are displayed here. We've been discussing them throughout the course of looking at processes, just generally speaking. Increased profitability, increased productivity, increased efficiency, increased quality, and of course, more convenience. Now, if we're to take each of those individually, when you think about increased profitability, sometimes it is related to people costs, which usually, I'm just being very straightforward. Usually when you're looking at digital transformation projects, there is the potential for you to have some loss of team members, right? However, that may not necessarily be the case. You may have a process that requires a lot of involvement of persons, and then when you automate that process end to end, they become more value-added workers. So they become more knowledge workers, can probably be assigned to different areas or be promoted into other roles that you may have hired outside for. And so this decreases your expenses in one particular area of the business, therefore supporting an increase in profitability, right? There are also ways that you can automate processes that will help with introducing new types of service that you weren't able to offer with humans. And so, especially when you're talking about being, e-commerce services. And so if you're selling online, now able to maximize your sales process, utilizing technology, not only are you selling with individuals, but you're also layering on top of that selling through technology, and that can also increase your profitability. So there's different ways to look at it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have persons, loss of persons. Now, the other area is when you're thinking about increased productivity. And in the context of increased productivity, what you're actually looking at now are, of course, persons being able to do their tasks faster and move on to other things. So you're actually increasing productivity as a component of that automation. Another area working in alignment with productivity is efficiency. So you're now able to not only be productive because there are things moving faster, but you are increasing the efficiency of your team members. Quality control. You know how sometimes persons talk about when you have too many people touching a thing, the quality of it decreases, right? So this is where automation, you can now automate something to be at the highest level of output. And this in particular is seen when you're talking about document management and like writing emails or drafting documents. And if you're shifting to documents being automated, where you have standard documents that don't have to be typed up over and over again, but you have a document that is made available and repurposed, right? It is drawn down from the system because it is now an automated document generation, right? You have less likelihood of error. For example, if somebody is inputting their information in the system, a customer is inputting their information in the system directly versus picking up the phone and calling somebody, and then the person on the other end of the line is typing it in, that in and of itself could increase quality. I'm sure maybe more than one of you on this call has had the situation where you call somebody, you're telling them your email address, and you're waiting for the email to come. You can't get it because guess what? The email address, they typed it up incorrectly. Whereas if you had typed it in directly into the system, you know, whether it's a form or any kind of online tool that they're using to accept information, you would have probably had better quality control in that sense. Of course, automation is much more convenient. You can just press a button as opposed to having to train somebody or instruct someone or remind someone of how to do things. So the convenience factor is also quite critical. Now, some of the things that you may experience, which is one of the reasons why, again, it's also important to recognize that automating processes does not mean removing the human element, is that you can sometimes compromise customer service. I still have experiences today where I want to talk to somebody, and whenever I am trying to find the customer service number, you know, it's like it's hidden now. Before, I would say maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you could easily look up, even in the phone book, you could easily look up a company's customer service number. You know, you had all these big, you now have these big contact centers, etc. But what has happened is most companies have outsourced service because they've introduced digital transformation, introduced process automation. It's been outsourced, usually a smaller outfit than what they had inside their organization. And it's not the first path. They try to make sure that the customer is trying to address the problem themselves, utilizing the tech before it actually gets to a person. And sometimes that can be very frustrating. And of course, it's not foolproof. These are machines. So automation is machine-led or machine-driven, and you're going to have sometimes challenges with that. Now, you'll notice that the steps to automate a process are different from the steps in process mapping. Process mapping, you had multiple steps. And of course, it's an iterative process. With automating a process, once you've gone through your process mapping exercise, then you're going to now start to think about what outcome am I trying to achieve and how can the technology help me to do so? What can the technology automate? And this is where I would say, guys, that there are no sacred cows, right? This is where you are not trying to, oh, but I like Mrs. Clark and I don't want Mrs. Clark to lose her job, you know, so I won't touch her activity, right? That's not the way to go about, and that's not the way. When you're talking with your MSMEs, you want to encourage them to think more along the lines of how can we create opportunities for Mrs. Clark's skills to be used in a more value-driven way, and how can we create more productivity and efficiency in the organization in a way that is going to help her to do that. So look for increased quality and efficiency. And of course, consult with an expert. When it comes to automation, especially if technology is not your zone of genius or excellence, and even in some cases when you're a tech company, right? Because tech companies sometimes take it for granted that their processes are great and are automated well. And sometimes that's not the case. So it's always great to have an objective person, because sometimes you really can't separate yourself from Mrs. Clark losing her work. And so having an objective person come in and actually look at the processes and support you in recognizing, where is their waste? Where is their redundancy, right? Where do we need to be looking to see how we can improve things, right? So here goes Catherine. I agree. It's not just about losing jobs, but moving people to better positions, right? So exactly right. That's exactly what happens. So thanks for that. Thanks for that. So when you're thinking about process automation and you're looking at whole processes, especially after going through the process mapping, and you guys can probably see now why it's really good to have the process mapping done. And a great way to actually empower team members is to ensure that they are included in the process mapping. Don't make this be a secret thing where you have the group that is going in to actually do the process mapping. And this is something that's really key to impart to the MSMEs when you're training them, is that when you think about digital transformation, don't go into it with a fear factor kind of perspective, because what that's going to do is it's going to limit visibility and transparency and create unsaid and mistrust. And so it's really about how am I becoming more efficient and productive and more profitable? And then now having somebody else that has an objective eye that's not attached to the organization, actually reviewing the processes that you've mapped and seeing how it can be amplified. Now, when you're looking at process automation, it depends on the type of organization that you are. For example, depending on the size of the company, they may be looking to replace their core technology. So for instance, right now, one of my clients that I'm working with, they are an insurance company, and we are replacing their entire insurance platform. And with that comes automation of certain tasks. And in order to automate certain tasks, there are workflows that are a part of their process. So the process mapping that you've done, it's now going to be translated into a workflow engine where you're going to be putting in different rules to say that, remember those decision points that you drew, you'll actually be telling the machine, you'll be putting in code that tells the machine, if the customer puts in if the customer is requesting a quotation and they have had an accident in the last 5 years, if they've answered yes to that, then you refer them to a customer service representative. If they answer no to that, then you take them to get their information for their car. So you'd be actually putting in a workflow in the system that will automatically move somebody through the process based on rules that are set, that the machine is then going to recognize and use to guide the flow depending on the different rules, right? So they are designed to guide the user input, right? So that you're making sure that they're asking for the right information and that they're putting in the right information to complete the process. And of course, we would all now be accustomed to putting in information in tools because we've been doing that so much these days, right? So when you're creating business rules in a workflow engine, you want to make sure that you are clear about how it's going to operate in the process. And as shared, the process mapping task that you've just gone through and those decision points are going to support that rules generation. And sometimes as you identify redundancies and waste in the process, you will recognize that some things you don't even need to put workflow around or rules around because they're no longer relevant. Like once we automate this, then we won't need these 5 different people actually reviewing and checking off things because we'll have now the support of the technology to do those checks and balances. Okay. So without business rules, a workflow engine is directionless. This is just in the same way that you would give somebody an instruction manual, like somebody comes on, they get an employee manual, or somebody comes on and they're learning to use a new system, you give them a systems manual, right? Whatever it is, business rules provide the instructions, the direction for your workflow engine so that they can actually execute the process in a way that gets you to the goal and provides the guidance that your customers and your team members will also need. Make sure that the software that is being leveraged enables the potential of the workflow engine to be maximized. Some organizations, some of the MSMEs that you are working with may not need to replace their entire back office system. It may be that they're putting in a project management tool, for example, and project management tools like Trello and Asana, they also have ways that you can put in workflows and business rules. Simple example can be a business rule that I use often in Asana when I'm using it is when I assign a task to somebody, you can actually utilize a business rule that says, if no one replies to this task within 2 days, send a reminder. So you can put in if then else statements that will ultimately support getting the tasks done, guiding people towards doing updates. It can be simple things, and then it can also be complex things. So when you're supporting your MSMEs and talking to them about researching workflow engines, because sometimes it may just be a workflow tool that they need versus an entire systems replacement, you ask them what upgrades that will be needed, right? What training are people going to need if they're supposed to actually implement this kind of tool? Who is going to be responsible for the tool? Who's going to be responsible for managing process automation tool? And what is the budget? We talked about that earlier. When you're thinking about process and you're thinking about the return on investment, you want to make sure that you have a clear budget that is allocated, that is going to support success in executing automation. All right. So workflow engines that may have revolutionized industries that you may have interacted with. Automated airport travel. I mean, nowadays, you literally can, from the moment you have the idea of a ticket or of a trip, you can hop online or on your phone and you can literally just purchase a ticket, check in before you get there. When you get to the airport, you don't necessarily have to speak to somebody. You can go through checking at the kiosk, go up, maybe when you drop your bag. If you don't have a bag, you don't have to interact with anybody at the baggage counter. The first person that you may be interacting with could be the person that is taking a look at your passport, like a TSA agent, right? So literally travel has become so automated that you no longer need a travel agent to book for you. Okay, you no longer have to go to the counter to actually check in or check a bag, right? There's so many different things that you can do now on your own that travel has become, you know, very simplified. For some people, they actually miss the personalization. I don't mind it. I'm one of those persons that actually likes the self-serve approach. But in some instances, when you're having challenges, you want to be able to talk to somebody and you want to do it easily. And I find that what has sometimes happened with a lot of airlines is that in order to resolve any issues, like let's say the kiosk isn't working or there's a problem with your reservation, then you have a long line that you have to be a part of now in order to get it resolved. So I still think that there are some tweaks left for the customer service. If you recall, we actually said that one of the areas that you may sacrifice is that service part. So this is one of those ways where I think that service suffers when persons run into challenges at the airport. And in the very first session, we actually talked about that, the self-serve checkouts at grocery and department stores. And when I think about, you know, like I'm checking out at a Target or a Walmart, we don't have self-checkout here yet in Jamaica. I know that some of you experienced that with Massey. When you have these self-serve checkouts now, before you may have needed 5 stations that you would have a cashier. Now you have those 5 stations and one person that is there to help you if you run into a challenge. Catherine, yes.
Hi there. Yeah, people are freaking out in Barbados on social media about the self-serve checkouts. They're like, oh, I'm
Really?
never using that. No, no, no. That's like taking away people's jobs. I mean, they're really,
Wow.
it's well, one or two people, I should say. They're really freaking out, as I said. And it's like, okay, guys, you're kind of missing the point here. When I was a child, donkey carts were frequent. Okay, they were everywhere. So you had blacksmiths. Guess what? I can't remember the last time I saw a donkey cart. I imagine there was
Right.
a whole lot less requirements, a less need for blacksmiths now. But
Yes, yes.
it's how society evolves, changes, moves. So, and then as you said, it can free up a human to go and do something that only a human can do at this point.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it is that fear factor part, right? And we talked about that. And I think what is really important is for organizations to support their customers, because ultimately to support their customers, support their employees. So internal and external customers. Change is the only thing in life that's constant. And it's just that when persons are concerned about the threat to themselves and their livelihoods, that they can't necessarily see the opportunities that could be available to them, right? And the truth is that you will have instances where there are going to be job losses. And at the same time, I think there'll be more opportunities than there will be job losses, right? So it's just organizations, and as you're training your MSMEs, that's going to be really key for you to reinforce, is for them to bring in objectivity so that they can really look at ways to be more efficient, productive, and profitable. And while they're doing that, now also look at, well, how are we going to empower our employees? How are we going to support them on this next level of their transformation? Because ultimately it doesn't work without them. And if you have persons who are afraid, they may leave the organization without actually being able to even step into their next level greatness. So it's really key for our MSMEs and for your organizations as well to take into consideration some of the concerns and start to address them day one. Like, don't wait, open up those communication channels and make sure people are clear about their role, what's in it for them in the transformation. All right. Now, the final section is really just an introduction to the lean methodology. And it's one of the more popular approaches that was utilized or has been around for a little while, I think since the 70s. And it's leveraged primarily in the initial stages in manufacturing companies and was utilized to bring in more efficiency through the use of technology. And technically speaking, at least from a definition perspective, it is a culture. And it is a culture that is really formulated around ideas, tools, and specific processes. And the companies that have actually had successful lean efforts are those that incorporate it as a part of their culture, right? And when you think about transformation, we talked about culture eating strategy for breakfast. And so whether it is the lean methodology or another type of process change, process documentation, and process automation methodology, it's really going to be important for the people to be enrolled in the process and enrolled in the direction that the company is going. So in your manuals, there's actually a detailing around the 4 main principles and the sub-principles of lean. The primary areas are philosophy, process, people and partners, and problem solving. And the problem solving area is where the continuous improvement comes in, and kind of what Andrea shared when she was doing her process mapping exercise is that, every single time they review the bid process, they review to see, did they do this well? Are there things they can change? Are there questions they can ask differently, better, etc.? So the whole idea and principle behind lean is the foundational start, to start thinking about this as a way of being, a way of executing. And this is largely because the persons who created the lean methodology, they recognize that they can't do all of this without the cultural piece. And the culture is all about the people, right? So making sure that the philosophy is embedded as a part of the culture before you start moving into, all right, so we need to identify the process flows, and we need to make sure that we are looking at the different systems that are used, and we need to make sure that we have all the different symbols and things articulated, decision points, et cetera, et cetera. So here is probably the most critical in any digital transformation and utilizing any process at all. So while lean may have this noted in their particular methodology as philosophy, for you, it could just be culture. And it needs to be embedded as a part of the way that things are done when you are thinking through digital transformation. Now, when it comes to the lean methodology, these are the primary areas that it focuses on when thinking about eliminating waste. So it has two primary areas that are the focus. It's value creation and waste reduction, right? And there are multiple different types of methodologies. There's another one called systems thinking that another client of mine implemented. And systems thinking is all about the outside in perspective. If we are our customer and we're using that outside in thinking, what are the things that we're doing internally that are unnecessary motion, that are unnecessary processing steps, that are creating idleness and waiting, right? So even if it's not a manufacturing situation, which is one of the areas that lean is used in quite a bit, there are still ways that you can look at eliminating waste through the lens of different types of process methodologies that are meant to help with creating more value and eliminating waste. When you're thinking about applying lean to digital, they can definitely be combined with a digital approach through the value increase, reduction of waste discussion that we have already started. And as an undercurrent that is going to actually support the success of leveraging lean methodology or any other type of process methodology, data is what is going to actually support driving the success of implementing any of these process review and automation tools, right? Your analytics, just from data that you've gathered, as well as the way that artificial intelligence interacts with those analytics to give you and provide you with insights on how the different areas that you may be experiencing waste, or the different areas where you could be seeing more value, need to be researched and looked at. So your artificial intelligence tools can actually be indicative. They can provide you with some predictive analytics, if you recall our data session, that will help to guide you towards that value creation. So in terms of lean, value means a desirable result from a product, service, or process. And any process that you are working should put out more than it consumes. So this value creation definition, I think, is really, really good, because sometimes you will be doing so much work for negligible amount of value, especially when you have multiple people resources involved in an actual process. So when you start to examine your process map and the number of persons involved in that process, it will become increasingly obvious or evident where you will need to actually remove some of the different elements, different activities, the different tasks that are giving you less value output than what you are actually, than the process itself is actually consuming. Now, when it comes to waste, which is the second primary concept of lean, it is the opposite of value creation, right? Anything that is not wanted, doesn't have any worth, any of those things are not producing any value. And so those elements or those items can be considered as waste. And eliminating waste is at the root of most, if not all, lean processes. So it is definitely something to be further examined as you are thinking about implementing, whether it's lean or any other process. Lean does tend to have quite a bit around the waste area. So depending on the type of industry or the type of organization that you are working with, you want to make sure that you're looking for a process methodology that can support the goals of the organization and looking at how you can implement that. Okay. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, we are actually at the end of our final session, which is also the end of our training series. I can't express to you how grateful I am for your attention and just all that you guys have been doing as far as engagement and participation. You have been really, really outstanding with making sure that you continue to be engaged and participating, and also just doing your own analysis just to see, that you're learning. I love that. And I'm really happy that you have all shown up and been present. Even on the holiday, we still had a majority of the class with us. So thank you so much for showing up and being present and your participation and engagement. Before you leave, I would love for you to just drop any highlights that you got from the training in the chat, any recommendations, suggestions, just highlights from your experience. What are the biggest takeaways you've had? What has impacted you the most over the last 7 sessions? Where you think you're going to be focusing your efforts and energy? And of course, any way that you thought I served you well. I can't say, guys, when we will meet again, but I hope it's sometime soon. So looking forward to seeing what you have to say in the chat. It's been my absolute and ultimate pleasure to serve you in this capacity. So looking forward to seeing what feedback you have to offer. And if anybody has any comments that they want to share, I'm happy to take your comments as well. Oh, thank you, Iola. You know what I actually realized through doing this this course with you all is, I have done a whole lot of work in this space. It's sometimes you don't remember or recognize, just how much work you have been doing in a particular area or field. And I will say that I definitely have done quite a bit of work, not just in digital transformation, but in all the different aspects of business excellence. And so it was just a lot of fun for me, to be able to share and to be able to use examples from my experience to share with you all. So I'm happy to have been a support system for all of you during this process. Yeah, for sure. So thanks again for joining, guys. And we're going to go ahead and begin to close out. Please feel free to drop any comments you may have in the chat. Looking forward to reading those. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your week. And of course, I also wish you very well on your upcoming sessions with your MSMEs. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. Yes, show you where to start one bite at a time. Absolutely, Tash, because digital transformation is definitely no joke. It is a significant amount of effort and areas to cover, right? So so looking forward to your success and hoping that you'll have a lot of success with your efforts. I'm wishing you all the best with that for sure. Thank you, Theory. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining and for participating with us. Thank you. Yes, I too, Iola, have found that time is a huge factor. And the truth is that at some point they'll have to make the time, because we are just at a stage where in the next 5 to 10 years, businesses are not going to survive if they have not actually taken on digital transformation. So hopefully they'll be willing to make the time for this very necessary shift in transformation and in how we do business. Yeah. All right, guys, thanks so much. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.